Yes, sir, we have a quorum.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I'm missing Paul.
I would like to call to order the regular board meeting of the North County Transit District for July 16th, 2020. And I will ask Anthony Flores, clerk of the board, to call roll.
Yes, sir. Jack Feller,
He's here.
Tony Krantz,
Here.
John Franklin,
Here.
Paul McNamara, Jim Desmond,
Here.
Terry Gasolin,
Here.
Joel Edson,
Here.
Sharon Jenkins,
Here.
Priya Bapatel. She is connected.
Okay, very good. And if you would now rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and the clerk will now provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
Yes, sir. In the event of an emergency, I will dial 911. In the event of an evacuation, please exit the building using the stairs. Do not use the elevators. We have fire extinguishers and alarms on each floor of this building. We also have a portable defibrillator and staff on hand trained in CPR procedures. That concludes my safety brief, sir.
Okay, great. And are there any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
Any telephonic comments?
None, sir.
Okay, just a note, housekeeping wise, we're going to conduct this COVID meeting as we have in the past. On the first round, we're gonna listen to the staff reports, and then we'll go around. I'll call on everybody, and you will have the opportunity to speak. And if we have additional questions, you'll speak up, and we'll get your second questions in. Finally, if there are any, then that's it. So moving on to the minutes and consent items 1 through 14. Can I have a combined motion to approve the minutes for the regular board meeting of June 18th, 2020, and consent items 1 through 14?
So
This is
moved
Terry.
by
Moved.
Joel Edson.
Okay. Terry, second.
Written by Edson and second by Gasterlin.
And just a note, sir, I will be reading individual board members' votes to avoid some chaos. So board members, if you would please indicate your vote when I call your name, and I will note it, and then I will announce the motion at the end. Okay. On the motion of board member Joel Edson, seconded by board member Terry Gasterlin, to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting held on June 18th, 2020, and consent items 1 through 14. Board member Bapatel, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board member Gasterlin?
Aye.
Board member McNamara?
I heard of it.
Board member Desmond?
Yes.
Board member Edson?
Yes.
Board member Franklin?
Aye.
Board member Jenkins?
Aye.
Board vice chair Feller?
See.
Board member Krantz?
Yes.
I'm sorry, board chair Krantz.
Yes.
Okay. On the motion, on the combined motion of board member Joel Edson, seconded by board member Terry Gasolin, to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting held on June 18th, 2020, and consent items 1 through 14. Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to other business items, 15 through 17. Karen Tukolsky, the Chief Administrative Officer, will review item number 15.
Good afternoon. Thank you, board members. So this is in regard to General Counsel's annual performance review. As you're all aware, General Counsel is engaged via employment agreement with North County Transit District. So at the April 18th, 2019 board meeting, the board unanimously approved General Counsel's amended and restated employment agreement, which is the one that is currently in effect. That agreement provides that upon a finding of satisfactory performance for the respective rating period, General Counsel is entitled to an adjustment in annual salary as we've detailed in the staff report. At its March 5th, 2020 meeting, the executive committee meeting, they determined that the General Counsel's performance was rated superior for the respective rating period, and this item is now before you for consideration. The recommendation is to approve the annual performance evaluation and compensation for General Counsel for her employment agreement to include an adjustment to annual salary. And that concludes my presentation.
Very good. Are there any board member questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, on a motion by Vice Chair Feller and a second by Sharon. Okay,
On the motion of Board Vice Chair Jack Feller, seconded by Board Member Sharon Jenkins to approve agenda item number 15. Board Member Bapatel, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Gasserland?
Aye.
Board Member McNamara?
Aye.
Board Member Desmond?
Aye.
Board Member Edson?
Aye.
Board Member Franklin?
Aye.
Board Member Jenkins? Board Vice Chair Feller? Board Chair Krantz?
yes,
On the motion of Board Vice Chair Jack Feller, seconded by Board Member Sharon Jenkins to approve agenda item number 15. Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
okay, thank you. Next item number 16, Greg Wellong, the Procurement and Contract Administration Manager, will review.
So I will take the lead and then I will transition over to Greg. Before we begin, I do want to recognize that there were about 4 of us, including Mr. Wellong and General Counsel and Mike Kelsey, a good-looking guy in the back, that were kind of the lead negotiators for NCTD in the finalization of this proposed agreement. So Anthony, can you go to the next slide? You guys can get me the clicker. All right, so like, all right. I'll go back to show the picture of my pretty train. Okay. All right, well, this won't work. I'll have Anthony. So our trains we're actually closing in on our trains being delivered. We're anticipating the first train coming in over the next 30 days. Let's go to the next slide. As the board knows, the procurement of these new trains represent a significant change for the district. This is a big technology leap in terms of us going from 1970 and 1990 technology to new state-of-the-art Tier 4 railroad technology. As detailed in the staff report, the development of the new charger locomotive that we're about to receive was done in collaboration with the Federal Railroad Administration, Amtrak, and the industry to produce a locomotive that would set the standard for the passenger rail industry for the foreseeable future in terms of Tier 4 technology. For us, it is a ginormous leap from where we stand today, going from Tier 0 to Tier 1 emissions technology through Tier 4 technology. So this is the delivery schedule. I will make a note that at our September board meeting, in all likelihood, we will be coming to you with a request to approve the procurement of the remaining 2 locomotives that are specified on the optional contract with Siemens. So as a result of that action, if approved by the board, we will have a totally new locomotive fleet in 2020 in terms of the apple-to-apple replacement of the 7 locomotives that we currently have. And then in 2023, approximately, we would have the 2 additional locomotives that would match the expansion that we will be doing with the additional equipment that's been funded through the SANDAG funding to support a total of 9 pieces of equipment for coastal rail operations. So it's significant. So as we're preparing for new locomotives, there is a lot of work to be done and a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes. One of the significant items that I will note is inventory. So over the course of the next few years, all of the inventory that we have that's associated with the current rail technology will have to be disposed of, likely through a sale. And we're going to have to procure new inventory. I will tell you in terms of our analysis, in terms of purchasing the locomotives, we've seen people spend up to $1 million per locomotive in terms of base inventory. The other thing is a significant amount of training that needs to take place in terms of whether it be on the transportation side, in terms of the engineers, in terms of what they need to do, and on the maintenance side in terms of what they need to do. There are also facility improvements that have to be done at the facility or over time to support the operations and maintenance of these trains. Next slide. So in terms of our current business model, as the entire board is aware, we contract out for those services. As we sit today with our contract with Bombardier, we have a base contract and we have a contract number 2 that supports overhauls. So within the base contract with Bombardier, it supports corrective maintenance, preventative maintenance, and consumable type of activities exclusive of fuel. As you can see, for fiscal year 20, that cost was $1.6 million, but that also includes the costs associated with coaster, cab, and car maintenance for preventative maintenance, consumables, and corrective action. So I want the board to keep in mind, we're talking about, it's a 2-piece contract. There's a base maintenance price, and then overhaul items require us to issue a separate task order to fund them. There's also just an item I will mention based upon the status of our locomotive fleet when Bombardier assumed the contract that requires us to cover the cost of repair items that would be over 4 hours of labor. Next slide. So the challenges for the current business model is that we will need to establish a base inventory. The minimum inventory level is about $3.5 million. That would be exclusive of a one-time procurement of trucks for which the board has already approved us for, that will cost about $1.6 million. $1.6 million. The challenge with inventory, just to be very, very clear, is you could go out and purchase $3.5 million of inventory, but that is an assumption about what you're going to actually use and consume. And so you have to be very careful in terms of what you actually put on the shelf. Some of these things have a specific lifetime that it can actually be on the shelf, and you want to avoid to the maximum degree buying things that you don't need. But at the same time, you have to mitigate against the risk of things that may have long lead times. So that's just one of the concerns. There's a significant amount more of training that needs to take place with these locomotives. And likely, given that these locomotives first went into revenue service in 2017, there's going to be lots of changes that are going to occur with these locomotives over its life cycle. And one of the key things to note is that, specifically according to our safety plans, only the original equipment manufacturer can make significant changes to the design of a vehicle. So you're going to have the ability, or that you'll have a challenge in terms of who can actually make a change, who can make a change and avoid invalidating warranties and other things that are associated with the equipment. Other key issues are lead times, obsolescence. So over time, manufacturers come and go, and you may have a difficulty in terms of a part being available, and overall availability. So don't think about this like maybe you would think about most of your automobiles, where you could go to Jiffy Lube or the guy across the street and pick up a part. You can't do that with locomotives and other specialty rail equipment. There's a significant amount of lead time, and manufacturers generally are not going to produce excess inventory other than the inventory that's required for them to meet their obligations under a contract that's executed. So i.e., they're not going to generate surplus parts thinking that you might need parts. they're only going to generate parts availability commensurate to people who've already issued a purchase order to them. So we've learned a lot, and sometimes we have had to learn the hard way with the Sprinter fleet, and based upon the experience that we've seen with other entities that have purchased Tier 4 locomotive technology. Again, we're talking about technology that is still fairly new. And kind of some of the themes that we learned with the Sprinter are the same themes that people are learning with these Tier 4 locomotives, is the need for that technical expertise and someone to make sure that you're going to have life cycle material availability. So remember, we're talking about an asset that's going to have at a minimum a 27-year life. And as you can see from some of our locomotives, they were purchased in 1970. So locomotives likely will be in place well beyond that 27-year, depending upon your availability of cash. Material management is a key thing. And for us, it's a big deal challenge because we outsource. So every time we bid, we'd be in a position over and over again of someone making an estimate about materials and charging us commensurate. And likely each time we turn over a contract, we would actually be providing another base as part of a startup cost for associated with materials management. Our ability to implement condition-based maintenance. And what that means is rather than strictly looking at the guidelines, also looking at the actual performance and making maintenance decisions based upon the condition of the locomotive. And in order to be able to do that, you have to have the OEM approval. So if you find yourself in a situation and you're deciding, I'm going to extend something or modify something, you want to make sure that you're getting the blessing from the OEM to do that. That offers significant cost savings for us. Now, in the case of the Sprinter, we've had some components that have lasted significantly longer than what we thought, but we were just out on a limb with no OEM support, and then having to work with maybe sub-suppliers to source those things, and hoping, sometimes crossing fingers, to make sure that we would be able to get those parts in time to be able to complete those overhauls. We also want to make sure that we have a long-term approach for being able to provide overhauls, knowing what the costs are, being able to look at it against the cost, and knowing where potentially, hey, we're going to do this overhaul program in its totality, or we only need to do a modified version of it without compromising the warranties, the performance requirements. It was highlighted in a communication from the General Counsel to me a few days ago, kind of the fact that we funded part of the funding from these locomotives are through the Air Pollution Control District. And there's some specific requirements for us to make sure that we maintain this locomotive in compliance and consistent with the OEM requirements throughout. And a key piece of this is that we can't find ourselves in position of purchasing a Tier 4 locomotive today and then not maintaining it in compliance with OEM and someone testing it 5 years later and it's now Tier 0. So throughout the 27 years, we're going to have to maintain the performance level in terms of that emissions technology from the locomotive. The other piece that I will mention is something we talk about here is zero delay. One of the things that we have continuously focused in on is we want to move away from the mantra of the notion that one failure per month is a good thing. We want to really make a significant investment in predictive analytics so that we can know if there's something going on with the locomotive that can give us an advance warning to make sure that if we can take actions to mitigate that failure in revenue service. We really want to know what things that we can do to extend the performance and improve and continuously improve the performance. These are things that we're thinking about as we're bringing this new technology on board NCTD. Next slide. So we've been working with Siemens, and Siemens, like all original equipment manufacturers, provide those types of services. And the Siemens offers a proposal to us that really addresses all of the challenges that we think we may face in the future that we've discussed in terms of having predictability, in terms of the cost of maintenance, not having to go out and making significant investments in spare parts up front Not having to worry about, do we have the capability to implement overhauls, not having to worry about, is this part going to be become obsolete and we have no ability to be able to source it without spending a ton of money for re-engineering, or the ability to continuously engineer the vehicle over time. One of the things we also talked about with Siemens and is included in this program is about availability and reliability of the equipment. We work with Siemens to establish a significant standard performance for the locomotives that are far beyond the current things that we, the current standards that we've included with the current Bombardier contract and with the current locomotive technology. And if they're able to achieve those goals and targets, we are committing that there would be some incentives, nothing that is significant, but achievement of those targets would represent a significant benefit to the riding public in terms of being able to ride and not worrying about a failure on a monthly basis. So all in all, we've crafted a proposal that addresses all of the issues and concerns and opportunities for success. And so this is what we're presenting to you guys today. Next slide. So after this, I'm going to transition over to Greg. So our Siemens agreement, again, provides for that base cost for preventative maintenance, corrective maintenance, consumable materials. That's all embedded in a fixed price that we're going to pay on a monthly basis, on a per locomotive basis. We do have all of the pricing associated with overhauls. Overhauls will be issued on a task order basis. So when you see the total value of the overhauls, those overhauls may or may not materialize. It will be actually based upon the condition of the locomotive. We may implement an overhaul that is a lower version of the overhaul that's identified in the call sheet. But that is a task order based activity versus the base one, which is a monthly payment that we will make on a per locomotive basis. We do have the opportunity, if we want to do a cross competing bid to see if the overall price has been improved. But again, those are kinds of flexibilities that we will play out over time to make sure that we're continuously mirroring market conditions. The contract does include incentives and penalties. Again, one of the things I'm saying is that, hey, outside of us buying those trucks, we don't have to buy materials for the startup of this contract. So we're not going to go out and buy a bunch of parts and materials whatsoever. They're responsible. And there's a performance metrics in there that require that establish the baseline performance for them in terms of making sure parts are available on the shelf when we need them. There's also metrics in there in terms of locomotive performance, where if they perform above the standard that we've established, we will pay them more. If they perform below, they will have to pay us. The total, just to give you guys some kind of thought process about it, is after the first 5 years, the totality of incentives and penalties is $50,000. After year 5, it rises to $167,000 as the baseline and gets escalated based on CPI. The significant portion of the incentives and penalties are focused in on reliability. I think it's about 60 to 70% of those dollars are there. The remaining are on materials availability, which I believe is a much easier task for them to control since they know they will have this contract in place. The contract does span the useful life of the locomotive. So as you will see, it's a 20-year base with the option for 7. I figure at any point, if someone wants to look at the end of the 20 years and say, we're going to wing it from there, fine, go for it. But I think it's important for us as we go forward to have that stability and to have this pricing component already set forward so that in the future, if we go out to bid for our O&M contract, this element of materials and technical services will not have to be included in that scope. So we're not going to be at that risk. We're not going to have the fear of someone marking up those costs and asking us to bring those costs to the table again in the future. So I'll turn it over to Greg for the next slide.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Yep. I'm going to go over the program details and costs. So as Matt explained, this is a 20-year contract with a 7-year option, and it is broken into 2 components: the base contract or base activities and the overhaul activities. Base activities, we have set pricing for the next basically 27 years of this vehicle, which is really great in budgeting for budgeting purposes. And the overhaul cost is something that we could, each year, we're going to meet with Siemens and they're going to kind of go through and here's a recommendation of overhauls. Here's some we can extend out. So these numbers here, especially with the overhauls, will be adjusted based on what activities are needed that particular year. So for the 20-year base program, we're looking at roughly $29 million plus annual CPI. And then for the overhaul cost for the 20 years, we're looking at roughly $47 million. For the option years, this is for 7 years. And this is all based on 9 locomotives. Right now, we're only operating 7. We'll get into another slide to where we kind of do a comparison with the Bombardier and how that program's managed. For the base for the 7 years is roughly around $11 million. And for the overhauls, roughly around $20 million. So in totality, we're looking at a base contract of $40 million and an overhaul contract worth $67 million. And there is a CPI factor or escalation factor built into the contract. This escalates annually every year, and it's based off of indices that we all agreed to. And it cannot exceed, it's anywhere from 0 to 3%. So at no time will we be paying more than 3% if inflation for some reason skyrockets. We're capped out or ceilinged at 3%. Okay, next slide. So we wanted to make sure the district was getting a good deal. So we tried to compare it against what we're paying Bombardier. And it's not an apples to apples comparison. Bombardier doesn't provide the analytics that we're going to get from Siemens. We're also getting 2 people full-time at our property on site, which is not part of the Bombardier contract. So this is a little skewed in a sense. We do have a number for you, what we think that value is. And so in general, right now for fiscal year FY21, we're going to pay about $1.7 million just in materials on the Bombardier contract. That doesn't include all the enhancements that Siemens is going to be providing. We negotiated with Bombardier because part of this 1.6 is for the locomotives and part of it is for the coach and cab cars. We extracted out the material costs for the coach and cab cars, and we're basically adjusting that dollar amount by $1.1 million. So that's not a net savings or anything. We're just moving that money over and putting it onto the Siemens contract. So we're estimating that to be around $21 million. If you also bring in the $3.5 million that we would have to put in for new inventory, we're looking at close to $25 million over 20 years. The Bombardier contract is not 20 years. This is just a view of how we came up to the reasonableness of Siemens' price. So their Siemens price is basically $24 million, which is pretty close to what we would have to pay or reasonably pay to Bombardier or a future rail operator. So in the end, this is just hypothetical or on average, there is actually a cost savings to us transferring over to the Siemens contract. So now we kind of want to bring in look, we go to the next slide, Anthony, let's see if let's stay on this one then. So part of that, and I discussed it, is the enhancement that Siemens providing us. And we had STV, one of our consultants, kind of give us a price to this. What's the value of this engineer on site for us? What's the value of this material manager on site for us? What's the value of the analytics that they're going to be providing? And they come up with a cost around $650,000 per year. So it's a big number. It's probably half the price that we're paying Siemens each year, just in another added value that Siemens is offering in this program. Okay. We did procure this under a sole source solicitation process, which is not the desirable way. We like competition. What we found when we did our analysis and our research about competition, right now it's just not out there. This vehicle has only been in service for since 2017, so roughly a little under 3 years. So maybe as things progress, as more vehicles come online, we'll see more competition. But as of right now, Siemens is it. They produce, a lot of the parts are produced exclusively for Siemens. They might be a general manufacturer, but they're modified in accordance to Siemens specifications, or they're actually produced by Siemens. So in either case, we're going to be having to procure from Siemens. the part of the sole source justification too is we have a requirement with our grant from the Air Pollution Control District to maintain these vehicles to Tier 4 standards. Recently, we had to produce a milestone of CARB emissions. These locomotives are tested at 0 and then again at different intervals. We had to use one of Amtrak's vehicles to test because they have a vehicle that's over 5,000 hours of use. So we actually had the vehicle in the LA yard, and it's basically like a mobile smog machine that comes and tests the vehicle. So we actually had a lab come to Los Angeles, test the vehicle for emissions in order to meet our grant requirements. Amtrak's vehicle passed beautifully, but this is kind of the scrutiny that we're getting when we signed up for this grant. These are very high-tech machines. They have to be maintained very well, just to keep up with that Tier 4 emission standard. It's not just you buy the machine and you never get checked again. They want to see that you're still maintaining that Tier 4 emission standard. So it's like your car. You just buy your car now every 2-3 years, you have to go get it smog checked. This is kind of the scrutiny that we're going to be seeing under this CARB grant. The fiscal impact, again, we projected on a comparison of 7 locomotives that we're going to save about $32,000 on average per year. Again, we base price, we have that set, it's fixed. We know what we're going to be spending each year. Like right now on our existing fleet, we don't know exactly what we're going to spend each year. We have a budget, but as things break, we spend more money. This is set. We know exactly what we're going to be spending. And part of that money to help us maintain these vehicles will be coming from Transnet program. So in the end, there is no fiscal impact to the budget, so no revisions there. And that's it for that one. So this is the last slide before we go into the questions, but this is the staff recommendation. Finalize and execute an agreement with Siemens Mobility for technical support and material management services for the charger locomotive fleet for a base period of 20 years in amount not to exceed $28,940,636 plus escalation, and exercise 1 7-year option in the amount not to exceed $10,596,652 plus escalation. If determined to be in NCTD's best interest, Matt indicated, at 20 years, we may say, no, we're good. And also advance overhaul services during the base contract period in the amount of $46,850,000 and $19,932,000 for the option years plus annual escalation. And thank you, and we will open it up. This is these are what they're going to start shipping in the next couple of weeks. So they're ready to be shipped, and we're very excited about that. And we'll open up to questions.
All right, thank you very much. There was a phrase used in this presentation a couple of times. You referred to trucks, and we're not talking about Ford F-150 trucks, right? You can explain to everybody what a truck is?
This picture helps.
Yeah, just look at the wheels.
Yeah, the wheel set. And what's unique about the new Chargers, it's kind of compartmentalized. So you could just pull the whole engine out. The whole top roof comes off, and you're able to get crane service in and just pull parts as you need. That was kind of an enhancement on the Charger locomotives. So if you need to remove the trucks, you lift it up, trucks slide out, put the new ones in, and you're off and going.
Excellent. Any questions in the boardroom here? Vice Chair Feller.
Thank you. I noticed right off the bat 125 miles an hour. And where do we go 125 miles an hour anywhere on our line?
Nowhere. This was just one part of the engineering standard for that train.
Oh,
Yeah, the F-59s
somewhere quick.
Well, if we build tunnels throughout the region, we will be able to go 125 miles per hour.
Yeah, good luck when we're here. So parts, you buy I'll use Kia with a 10-year warranty. What we're actually doing is paying for the warranty with this additional from Bardier. I'm not exactly sure if I understood how These have to have some kind of warranty.
So this comes with a 2-year warranty,
Okay,
but we would still have to purchase parts. So there are preventative maintenance parts that we would have to purchase. And then at the end of the 2 years of the warranty period, you would have to purchase all parts as well.
okay. That's it. Thanks. Oh, well, you don't need a motion yet.
Board
I have,
mem-
I have a question, Tony, when you get a chance.
Okay, just a moment. Board Member Jenkins has one.
I have a couple questions. When are these likely to be in operation?
Question. I think we're targeting for sure by early 2021.
Okay.
Some will be out there earlier. The key piece is I don't feel like we have any pressure to rush,
Correct.
given what's going on right now.
Right. Okay. And then my other question is the annual escalation maximum of 3%. Is that something that is reviewed and agreed upon by each party, or does one party set what the escalation might be, or is that another point of negotiation? I know it's based off of CPI, but it says a maximum of.
Right.
So is it just CPI?
So we have a standard negotiating for NCTD. This agreement includes a bunch of different CPI indices. So we reviewed what their proposed CPI indices were to make sure that they weren't fishing in a barrel, to say. But our standard agreement with anyone is always to focus in on capping CPI to no more than 3% without respect. But we do look at different areas of the different types of CPIs to make sure that we're matching up the commodity or the activity with the appropriate CPI.
Okay. Okay. And then let me see here. Look through my pages. On the cost analysis, where you talked about the $658,160 in savings, I was a little confused. Is that per year or over the whole 20 years?
Over the whole 20 years.
Okay.
And I think, as Greg was saying, when you look at this, this is not an apples to apples comparison, because the Bombardier contract does not include the additional package of the technical services that we're getting for this contract. So the apples to apples, we're really, because from a board member point of view, you may say, hey, Matt, great that you want these services, but we care about the dollars. So we wanted to show you within the total program, from a total spend, that we would result in savings of over a 20-year period, even though we believe that the scopes are dramatically different.
Okay. And then where you talked about the proprietary parts, proprietary to Siemens, are they produced here in the U.S. or elsewhere where they might have to ship them from another country and we have to wait a long time for them, or?
Well, so the parts, and I know before we even thought about this agreement, we were looking, and a significant amount of the parts on the list were Siemens parts. So they had a Siemens parts number where they might have sourced it from another supplier, but it had been specifically then engineered to meet Siemens requirements to be on their equipment. And I'll give you an example, Sharon, of the real world for us with the Sprinter, because Siemens was the manufacturer for the Sprinter. So we've had over periods, because we didn't have a maintenance agreement with Siemens. So we've had to go all over the world to find out who was the original equipment manufacturer for something to work with them to deliver parts to us.
Okay. And they're guaranteeing the parts will be there.
Yes, that's what this agreement is about, that they will ensure the parts are there.
And then where you talk about the 32,909 average per year savings, again, is that an annual cost, or is that per locomotive, or is that for the whole year? That's
That's basically the 658 divided by 20.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's all my questions. I just want to comment that I appreciate staff's diligence to work through this contract, because it's better to negotiate before you have a need and be proactive than it is to try to negotiate when you're reacting to a situation. So I think it was very wise to lock us in now to the agreement. So thank you.
Very good. Board Member Desmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have a question, I guess. It kind of seems, I mean, we're buying the Siemens locomotives, which is good. And then, you know, for them to tell us you can only buy the parts from us and you can't get them from anywhere else, we're kind of locked in with them. I'm just kind of curious, is this Bombardier, do we have any sort of existing agreement with them that they're still on for a couple of years, or their contract ends as soon as Siemens starts? I just wonder if there's any sort of a buyout or anything or that we've got with Bombardier that we're still obligated to.
So a couple of things. We're not obligated to purchase parts for Siemens. In fact, we don't have to enter into an agreement whatsoever with Siemens associated with parts. The board could tell us, hey, Matt, we want you guys in Bombardier to go and purchase parts under the existing business model. We could do that today. The relationship with Bombardier is not changing at all in terms of the operations and maintenance agreement. They have a base 7-year contract with us with a 1 3-year option. That base ends in 2024. So we're not changing this. All we did was Jim, was to de-scope the relative value that's included in their contract associated with maintenance of materials for the coaster equipment. So Bombardier will be providing all of the labor in terms of the maintenance. Siemens will be providing them technical assistance and support and materials. So they will both be on site.
Okay, because I thought one was, I guess, usurping the other, but you're saying they're both going to be on. And then, so I guess though the prices, I know you said they weren't apples to apples, but I guess I'd assumed one was going to be gone and the other one was going to take the place of, but you're telling me now that they're both going to be operating together and we're still going to realize those savings with them both operating at the same time?
Absolutely.
All right.
Board Member Franklin, do you have any questions? Board Member Edson?
Sorry about that. I had to find the mute button, and no, I don't have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Edson?
Thank you for asking, Anthony. I believe my questions have been asked and answered. I think it sounds like the right thing to do.
Board Member Gastron?
Yeah, this is a clear presentation. I have one question, and that's, are there energy savings or energy usage differences with these?
Well, we were hoping that there were going to be fuel savings, but that's not what we have seen from current users of that equipment. The key benefit from the emissions is lower emissions.
Okay, well, that's a benefit in my book. And thank you. Those are my questions.
Board Member McNamara?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Board Member Bhat Patel?
My questions have been answered. Thank you so much.
Okay, and just to clarify, you mentioned that part of this contract involves data. It's my recollection from the presentation that we got in Sacramento at Siemens that they have fielded these locomotives throughout the United States, maybe around the world, and that they accumulate data from each one of those locomotives, and they're able to identify maintenance issues prior to you actually experiencing that. And so we, as part of this contract, are going to get that as well.
Exactly. We get access to it because if we don't have that agreement, we don't get access to data.
So that's what they're selling, I think, is probably the biggest benefit for us. So I appreciate that. Okay, very good. I would entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Second.
Okay. On the motion of Board Vice Chair Jack Feller, seconded by Board Member Sharon Jenkins to approve agenda item number 16, Board Member Bhat Patel, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Gasterland?
Aye.
Board Member McNamara?
Aye.
Board Member Desmond?
Aye.
Board Member Edson?
Aye.
Board Member Franklin?
Aye.
Board Member Jenkins?
Aye.
Board Vice Chair Feller? Yes. Board Chair Krantz?
Yes.
Okay. On the motion of Board Vice Chair Jack Feller, seconded by Board Member Sharon Jenkins to approve agenda item number 16, Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
Okay, thanks, Greg, for the great work. The whole team at NCTD, thank you very much. Next, we will move on to item number 17 to adopt California Rail Safety Month proclamation. Sean Lupero, the Chief of Safety, will review this item.
All right, I can't talk with that on, so I'm going to take it off. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is to discuss Rail Safety Month for September 2020. The reason we do it this month is because there's no board meeting next month, so we want to get ahead of the problem rather than behind. And there we go. So safety is a core value of NCTD, and that's not just once a month or once a year. It's 24/7, 365 for us. What this item does is allows us to focus at least 1 month out of the year on rail safety. It's going to be a little challenging this year, so we're going to focus a lot on electronic communications and marketing because we can't really do a whole lot as far as in-person events for folks. So we're going to really focus on the electronic side to let people know what we do and how to cross tracks and railroad safety, all kind of wrapped up in one. Some of the focus areas for coaster and sprinter is trespassing on the right-of-way, folks that may disregard some of the signaling at the crossings, and then just general actions around the right-of-way by motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists. As far as for fiscal year 20, just some of our statistics, we had 157 near-miss events on the railroad. A near-miss event, again, is when the engineer or train operator has to conduct some sort of action, either braking or slowing down to prevent a potential incident. We did have over 2,000 reports of trespassing, and those are trespasser reports, not number of trespassers. So some of those reports could have multiple people associated with it. And then 14 strikes, 10 of which were fatal across both our subdivisions. Our ongoing campaign, again, we focus on it in September, but it is a year-round event. It's a great opportunity for outreach and education. A lot of that's going to depend on what's open. September is only 45 days away for those of you keeping score, but we don't really know what the rules are going to be. So again, we're going to focus a lot on electronics to make sure people are aware of what we're doing. But if we can get out and about and interact with folks, we will certainly do that as well. And we'll try to do some of those open air events. We'll do outreach efforts where we can. We are part of the National Rail Safe Operation, so they pick a specific day where we really focus on safety and railroad safety. So if we can participate, we will do that. We will highlight that on our webpage, as well as the board proclamation recognizing September as Rail Safety Month. So here's some recent shots of some of our outreach. Obviously, several of these were prior to COVID-19. You can see some of the outreach events that we did. That center picture is my rail system safety specialist, Philip Moore. He is a California Operation Lifesaver instructor, and so that's him going to elementary school talking about rail safety with some students. We do have additional things that we pass out. We got little coasters that we'll pass out to some of the local restaurants and our watering holes, depending if what's open, to remind folks if they're around train tracks to be safe if they're walking around. We've also developed, the marketing team has developed a video, so I'm going to, Anthony will get this to work. It's about 2 minutes, and it's just going to highlight rail safety, and we plan on broadcasting this during Rail Safety Month.
What's wrong with this picture? The answer is, this group is walking on railroad tracks and don't seem to realize that a train is coming. North County Transit District, in partnership with California Operation Lifesaver, strives to educate the public about proper safety around the railroad. So here are a few questions to test your train knowledge. True or false? It's okay to walk on the tracks when there's no trains around. False. Trains can come at any time, on any track, from any direction, and it's never safe to walk on train tracks. True or false? I will hear a train approaching. False. Trains can be incredibly quiet. You might not be able to hear an oncoming train in time to get out of the way. True or false? If a train comes, I can move out of the way in time. False. Trains move much more quickly than you do. The only way to be safe is to never be on the tracks. True or false? A train will stop in time to avoid hitting a person. False. It can take a train a mile or more to come to a full stop. That's the length of 18 football fields. All of these are common misconceptions, but it's important to understand that they are false. Exercising and enjoying the outdoors are always a great way to spend your time, especially in sunny San Diego. But you should always remember to avoid walking on the tracks, so that way we can safely keep San Diego moving one train at a time.
Thank you, Anthony. So we do have partnerships with a lot of different agencies, local law enforcement, certainly the top three that we contract with. Thank you. The top three that we contract with for law enforcement services, the San Diego Sheriff's Department with the Transit Enforcement Services Unit. We also contract to have MOUs with Oceanside and Escondido, but we do partner with the other departments that are listed there, Carlsbad, San Diego, local communities, schools, as well as California Operation Lifesaver. So based on all that, the staff recommends that the Board of Directors adopt a proclamation recognizing September 2020 as the State of California Rail Safety Month. Pending any questions from the board, that's all I have for this presentation.
Okay, thank you for all your efforts. Any other questions or comments? Board Member Jenkins.
I have one. So do you try to go to the schools that are near our tracks? For instance, I'm thinking going through Escondido, you might not necessarily go to the schools on the far east side of Escondido, but you might on the
Absolutely,
west side.
yeah. So a lot of it's request-based. So certainly if they come out, irregardless if they're by the tracks, we're going to go visit. And then we actually seek out those schools that either may have issues around the rail or that are close to the tracks. And that includes the coastal communities as well as the ones following along the Sprinter line. So we do both. A lot of it just depends on the availability. And again, it's we can't hit every class. Some of them like to do more of an open presentation, like in a multi-purpose room where you can get multiple classes together, but sometimes it's just single class environment. So it kind of depends. And it's not just us, it could be any Operation Lifesaver instructor. So there's a certain amount in Southern California. So some of those other folks not associated with NCTD could also be going out and giving these presentations. So we're one piece of the pie, but we don't say no to anybody that asks, and we do reach out to those that are around the rail.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, any comments from folks on the Zoom?
Yeah, this is Terry. This sign, See Tracks, Think Train, is so incredibly informative. We really need something simple in so many places, where the tracks are available for people to get near to. Is there any way to somehow, I don't know, pass out coasters for drinks, something that has See Tracks, Think Train? The population to get this through to, especially right now, especially in Del Mar, are the high school students. And it is amazingly difficult to get them to understand that it is not okay to be on the tracks when a train isn't anywhere nearby. Any thoughts?
Well, we certainly do have the medium. So we do have handouts. We do have coasters. If teenagers are getting in bars, there may be other issues we have to deal with. But in general, we do have things that we can pass out. When we do go to schools, if it's a high school, we will pass out these materials. For the younger kids, it's kind of a coloring book type of stuff. But as you get older, it's more of a kind of a trifold handout as well as coasters. So we do have things we can pass out. The challenge is where do we do that, especially in COVID, if schools are not in session in the summer and people aren't supposed to congregate. So that's right now is our biggest challenge is who to pass those out to. So we have had a lot of some community centers. And then when we do our own NCTD outreach events, we have these materials available to hand out to folks. So we focus when we can. But again, it's somewhat challenging during COVID. So we have the stuff.
Yeah, I could imagine putting, a diamond-shaped sign like this at the end of every bluff top alley and street in Del Mar. And if it were done, if we could do it for September, then I could imagine arguing for it to stay longer. All the places where there are potential access points. This is a striking image, and I really think you've hit an excellent design here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just make a comment because with those new Charger locomotives coming online, those locomotives are significantly quieter than the existing locomotives that we have. And so I've asked our staff, we're going to be doing as much outreach as we can. It's going to be critical for people to understand as we continue to upgrade our technology, being near those tracks will become even more dangerous because these trains are significantly quieter than the trains that we operate today. And so we're going to be reaching out to let people know, and we will do all of the above strategy, but it's going to be important, and we're going to ask the cities to help us in that endeavor of getting the word out to stay off of the tracks. Tracks are for trains, not for people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'd like to order 30 of these signs. It's a little bit of a joke, no budget for that, but boy, I could really see these doing great things.
Thank you.
Okay, and speaking of COVID, are we offering the opportunity to Zoom with these schools that are conducting class by internet?
Once they're either in session or yes, we can certainly coordinate if they are doing virtual sessions. We could certainly do that and coordinate. So absolutely, we will look into that.
All right.
Tony, I have a question.
All right.
Yeah, it's Supervisor Desmond. Thanks for the presentation. It's very good. I just have a question, and maybe we had it recently. I can't remember. I'm on too many boards. On cybersecurity, I mean, I was just wondering if when was the last time we had a presentation on cybersecurity and what we're doing about it, and if that could be a presentation if we haven't done one in a while to bring that back.
Yeah. Why don't we will put that as an agenda item to discuss cybersecurity, and that will be with our IT chief. We have been doing some work around this issue, and definitely you're spot on in terms that this is becoming a significantly even more important issue for the industry, particularly as we have technologies like positive train control. So we will get this on the board agenda. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, then I would make a motion that we adopt the proclamation recognizing September 2020 as the State of California Rail Safety Month.
I would second that motion. This is Jewel. And I also wanted to add that I would be interested as a board member to receive either a screenshot, but in JPEG or some sort of format that I could post on local social media. Because the more we get it out there, it's just passing that message.
Well, we'll provide that. We have those where we can send those out. So we'll provide that to the board.
Thank you. So with that, second.
On the motion of Board Chair Tony Krantz, seconded by Board Member Joel Edson to approve agenda item number 17. Board Member Bapatel, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Gasterland?
Aye.
Board Member McNamara?
Aye.
Board Member Desmond?
Aye.
Board Member Edson?
Aye.
Board Member Franklin?
Aye.
Board Member Jenkins?
Aye.
Board Vice Chair Feller?
Yes.
Board Chair Krantz?
Yes.
On the motion of Board Chair Tony Krantz, seconded by Board Member Joel Edson to approve agenda item number 17. Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to informational items. Number 18, we're sticking with Chief of Safety Sean Lupero to receive an update on the impacts of COVID-19 on transit operations.
Thank you, sir. Again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This will be the COVID-19 update for July. Here's the 5 areas that we're going to focus on: ridership, revenue, an update on some of our procurement activities, compliance, as well as the cleaning standard. So here's the graph of ridership. This starts just mid-March, about when COVID started to sort of take the forefront. You could see shortly after that the kind of dip, and then this goes all the way through up until last week. So what we've seen over month to month is fairly consistent ridership. We're still approximately 62% less, and that's across all modes, with about 12,500 weekday trips. Each mode is performing a little differently, though. So Sprinter, on average, is a little less than 50% off what we see year to year. Breeze is a little more than 50%, and Coaster is still, based on the commuter rail, it is still over 90%, between 90 and 92, generally down year over to year. but based on recent events and certain restrictions being implemented back on, our forecast, at least in the short term, is this is probably going to be fairly consistent or fairly flat, pending any significant changes in restrictions that would open up additional businesses and activities. As far as revenue, we've got revenue totals for April and part of May. Each one was lower, between 73 and 75%. And June right now is showing about 81% down, but we do have to do reconciliation with MTS for some of those regional passes. So in general, our revenue is down. I'm sure you're saying, Sean, why is our revenue down more than our ridership overall? So if you look at it on the bus side, we are doing rear door boarding. So if people have passes, that's okay, but we are obviously not collecting those cash fares, and that is providing it, causing an impact, making revenue declines a little more than ridership. As far as procurement updates, the thermal temperature screening system was delivered yesterday. So we have those. We're going to implement those in all of our facilities. That will do automated screening for temperatures for employees when they come to work. That'll be for NCTD and contract staff. We're currently testing one of the units to make sure everything works okay, and then we will install those at all of our facilities. We've advanced the procurement for hand sanitizing for the other revenue vehicles. We have those on the coaster already, but we're going to put them on the Sprinter and our bus fleet as well, and that is advancing. And we're continuing with our procurement for driver barrier installation, so that's for our bus fleet. We expect those to be complete by September. As far as compliance and our passengers, overall, based on the data we've seen, we still have a high level of compliance with the face covering requirements. That comes not only from the coach operators and the train attendants that are doing those counts for us and the conductors, but also inspection activities that are done by the rail, bus, and safety divisions. Overall, it's less than 1% non-compliance for Coaster and Breeze, and it's still about 3% non-compliance on the Sprinter. So to spin a positive, 97% on Sprinter and 99 plus on all of our other modes are compliant for face coverings, and we do appreciate that from our customers. And there's what it looks like graphically for the bus. You can see the bus ridership. That's a month's worth of data. And again, the coach operator is able to hit a button on their panel, and that tells us the count of folks that don't have that, and we're able to strictly do the count at the end of the month to know how many that we have that are non-compliant. So overall, again, that's less than 0.5% on the bus side, which is good news for us. And really, we appreciate that from our customer base. As far as a cleaning standard, APTA released a white paper, which is called Cleaning and Disinfecting Transit Vehicles and Facilities During Contagious Virus Pandemic. It was released the middle of last month. We've established a working group here at NCTD to recommend a long-term cleaning strategy based on that white paper. We're working a statement of work and an ICE together, and once we have that, that will sort of set our enhanced cleaning protocols for not only the revenue vehicles, but our facilities for the future, and will be in line with that cleaning standard that was published. That's kind of a snapshot of those 5 topics for NCTD for COVID for the month, pending any questions from members of the board.
Okay, questions? Any questions from the folks on the Zoom? Hearing none, I just would like to say to all of our operators that I appreciate their efforts on the front lines, and that so does the transit riding community who depend upon these transit services to get where they need to go. So thank you very much. Moving on to item number 19. Katie Persons, the Senior Strategic Planner, will review this and give us a presentation on the Low Sand Corridor San Diego Intermodal Improvement Program.
Oops. My button was not on that entire time. Let me start over. Ulrich Leister will join us from DB Engineering and Consulting, and he will provide an update on the low sand optimization study and the BNSF NCTD freight pathing study. And then I will provide an update on the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program grant application that will be submitted in a few weeks. So Ulrich, take it away.
Hello, Katie. Thank you. I am providing an update today on the low-SAN optimization study and the freight pathing study that was commissioned by BNSF and NCTD jointly. You've seen a presentation by me, I think in early March, about the status of the study back then. So now a bit more detail that was also presented yesterday at a meeting that CalSDA organized on the Del Mar Bluff Working Group. The purpose of the optimization study has been to work with each of the 5 operators across the low-SAN corridor to perform a comprehensive review and analysis of current and future operations. And the study focuses on 3 key elements: a thorough analysis of existing operations, developing optimized operating patterns across the entire corridor, and the entire corridor means San Luis Obispo, Los Angeles to San Diego, and to review existing capital investment plans and to prioritize investments by pinpointing each of those investments to clear service outcomes and clear service benefits. In the long run, to enable an achievement of the state rail objectives that are stated or were defined in the 2018 State Rail Plan. The result of the study will define a near and long-term plan that provides integrated regional rail service, maximizing available and planned capacity, and providing service in a consistent pattern with by design connections throughout Southern California to enable an anywhere to anywhere network, at least on the rail side, and then eventually also with the feeder services being able to tie into that perfectly. If you could, yes, thank you, Katie. So the State Rail Plan has been on the outset the guiding document laying out the vision of a customer-focused and integrated rail system. And it identifies, and this is what you can see on the right-hand side here, investment levels for the Southern California, specifically for the low-SAN North and low-SAN South corridor over time horizons that were defined in the State Rail Plan as 2022, 27, and 2040. If you could go to the next slide, which I will go over just quickly because most of those facts I'm sure you're well familiar with, but the low-SAN corridor and the entire corridor, and especially also the southern portion to San Diego, is a critical asset to provide passenger and freight service in the region. The entire corridor, about 351 miles long, serves 41 communities, and it is the nation's second busiest inner city passenger rail corridor. It also is the only viable freight rail link between San Diego and the rest of the nation, thus making it a critical asset to access the ports, a critical asset for San Diego's economy, and also the Pacific Fleet, which is stationed in San Diego. We expect a need to increase service levels on the corridor, and this may sound, especially these times, a bit out of place, but we will get through this. So we expect still service levels to increase and to allow or a need for additional growth on the goods movement side in order to provide the mobility in this corridor that Southern California requires. If you could please go to the next slide. And talking about that mobility, and this is a bit what we covered in the last presentation in March as well, when it comes to public transportation and railroads, mobility really means a high quality service that is operated in an integrated manner. This means that service is available, it provides reliable connections throughout the region, and it provides consistency where it's dependable and easy to use. The corridor currently, and this is true for the entire corridor, but to some extent also for its southern portion, is heavily peak focused with freight services only overnight. Legacy scheduling without an integrated strategy across the entire region has inevitably produced connections rather by coincidence. And there also has been a culture to frequently tweak and reorganize train schedules. The future, in line with the State Rail Plan, and that is what you see here on the right-hand side, will bring reliable all-day service, including daytime freight slots, a clear focus on connections wherever services come together to provide, ideally, anywhere-to-anywhere connectivity, and a strong framework that delivers consistency, meaning that the basic structure of schedules across the network is only adjusted in sync with transformational investments, and otherwise generally is very reliable and dependable. So transformational investments and key investments, some of those are necessary to increase service quality and quantity. And if you could go to the next slide, focusing on the southern part of the corridor, key areas of concern when it comes to infrastructure are, of course, the Del Mar Bluffs and their stability, but also San Clemente to the north and the port of San Diego itself and this area when it comes to freight capacity. Corridor capacity as of today is limited to 3 trains per hour, and that's total trains. So both directions summed up, 3 trains per hour around San Clemente and 5 trains per hour between Oceanside and San Diego. The rail infrastructure around the port of San Diego supports really only sporadic trains movements as of today. It is possible, and these are findings of the 2 studies combined, to raise capacity across the corridor to a uniform 8 trains per hour by addressing the remaining bottlenecks with really pinpointed investments. And next slide, please. Exactly that was the task at hand of the low-SAN optimization study and the BNSF NCTD freight pathing study. The question was, how do we deliver a customer-focused service and pinpoint the right investments to increase line capacity? So if you could go to the next slide, please. Of the 2 studies, the low-SAN optimization, and that's the study you heard about in March already, is the umbrella plan. It is guiding the development of the entire low-SAN corridor from San Luis Obispo to San Diego. For the low-SAN optimization study, we're looking at 3 planning horizons or target years: a near term, 2021, 2022, a midterm, which is 24, 25, and a long term, which is 27, 28, so LA Olympics. And implementation of the plan will result over the short term in a restructured service using a regular pulsed schedule, in delivering consistent frequencies, and that's very important, by design connections, and providing a strong basis for improved reliability. The midterm will allow filling remaining service gaps and then utilize through tax at Union Station and identify investments that need to be prioritized, mainly from already existing capital investment plans. And then the long term expands this further and meets the California State Rail Plan objectives. A key component to all of this are these regular pulsed schedules. They're an important tool to use infrastructure efficiently, to make pinpointed investments, and to provide service that caters to many travel needs. And for that next slide, I would like to give you an example to make that a bit more tangible. Should you find yourself at Los Angeles Union Station and you want to take a train south to San Diego, on the left-hand side, this is what the schedules would look like that are offered to you today, or what you see on the left-hand side is fall 2019 schedule. On the right-hand side, you can see what this can be in the future. The regular pulse schedules allow us to go from a heavily peak-focused service with some severe service gaps where for 2 or 3 hours there is no service at all, to a consistent all-day service. Pulse schedules are a dependable framework also, and that's very important to local agencies providing connecting services. So bus services, both in San Diego, but also in Orange and Los Angeles. These connecting services are an important concern to really increase the usefulness of the rail corridor. And pulse schedules offer simply an intuitive service where you know, in this example here, the Los Angeles example, every hour, 10 minutes past the hour, you know you can take a Surfliner to San Diego. With that, maybe to the next slide to give you also another example here, how this focus on connectivity and consistency throughout the day can deliver quite impressive results. This is an illustrative example, but I'll walk you through first what you're seeing here. On the left-hand side, you see, or I'll explain first this matrix. So this is a matrix, color-coded are the number of connections provided in a single day. On the left-hand side, and this is very small font, it's not supposed to be readable, but I let you know what this is the rail stations, all rail stations of Southern California, sorted north to south. So at the top is San Luis Obispo, at the very bottom is San Diego, and at the bottom are all of the San Diego stations. Somewhere in the middle is the Inland Empire, and then Los Angeles. And at the bottom, it's the exact same thing. And each of those colored dots there represents one origin destination pair, so a place from which you could depart and to a place that you would want to go. And then the colors represent how many connections are available. The red and orange colors really mean there is just a handful of connections to do this every day. And the greens are then in the 10, 12 to 16 times a day, and 16 times roughly represents about service once an hour. On the left-hand side, that is 2019, and on the right-hand side is an illustrative example based on the structures and patterns that were developed as part of the optimization study, what this could look like. And one very important thing to note here is this is still using the same number of trains. So the right-hand side is not assuming big service growth. This is really just a restructuring and making sure that connections work by design wherever that is useful to have a connection. So you can see this clearly opens up new markets and opens up markets. I use always the example San Bernardino to San Diego, for example. These are both cities that are of an important size. They are connected by railroads. They just aren't connected by direct trains today. But if we have connections that are set up well, then these cities also would be connected amongst each other by railroad, even if it involves a transfer. So if you could go to the next slide, please. I'll give you just a quick summary of or overview of the NCTD BNSF San Diego Pathing Study, which under the umbrella of the Low-SAN Optimization Study focuses on conceptualizing freight expansion to San Diego. The freight studies planning horizons, of course, are in sync with the low-SAN optimization, and they lay out concepts for a minimum of 3 freight paths to the Port of San Diego over the short term. And these are daytime freight paths, a minimum of 5 over the midterm, and then up to 8 paths over the long term, along with measures that would get some relief for San Diego Depot, enabling a convention center station and extension of coaster service, and potentially a maintenance facility for inner city equipment at National City. Combined, those 2 studies, the low-SAN optimization and the NCTD BNSF freight study, are addressing the challenges of implementing the 2018 State Rail Plan goals and are developing a clear investment roadmap over the next 10 years. And that's what I would like to get into next with the next slide, please. These is an overview over the identified targeted investments that are coming out of those 2 studies combined, color-coded by study. So the blue is the low-SAN optimization, the umbrella study, and then in orange are the potential investments identified out of the more conceptual freight pathing study to increase freight access to the Port of San Diego. Looking at maybe Del Mar first, the optimization study and the freight study did not identify the need for additional track on the bluffs, so no double tracking on the bluffs, and they do not recommend realignments. However, no recommendation is in the sense of that we neither say do it nor don't do it. We did not look at realignments as part of these studies because those investment levels were out of scope for the low-SAN optimization and the freight study. But we certainly come back with, yes, of course, we need track there. So whatever the solution is, if it's stabilizing the bluffs or something else, that is what's necessary. At San Clemente, targeted investments within what is already identified by the Metrolink SCORE program allows growing the capacity from the 3 trains of today to 4. And then further investments that were identified by the freight study would allow doubling capacity to 8 trains per hour, really enabling quite different service in this area. At the Port of San Diego, various upgrades are identified. I will get to both San Diego and San Clemente in just a moment with a bit more detail. Aside from those locations, we also, out of the work here, identified 3 double tracking projects that are already part of Sandex plans, but projects that should be prioritized over other projects. And those are specifically San Dieguito, Bataquitos, and Carlsbad. Focusing on San Clemente real quick, and I'll go through that briefly because I assume that is less of your interest here at the NCTD board meeting. If you could go to the next slide, Katie, please. Just to give you a bit context here, even so it's outside of San Diego County, it of course still plays a role how schedules can be structured in San Diego County. San Clemente currently is the longest single track section between Los Angeles and San Diego. It stretches about 9 miles from Capistrano Beach to San Onofre. And for a train, it takes about 15 minutes to traverse this section. So 15 minutes that a train is running on single track and is occupying this entire segment. Then it's easy math that if it takes 15 minutes, you can't get too many trains through that area. This bottleneck determines capacity. So that's just the throughput, the total numbers. But more important, actually, from a passenger perspective, is that it also constrains schedules for the entire corridor. So everything on the low-SAN optimization study, any idea, any concept to try to improve connections or timings of trains, it always had to start at San Clemente. That's just the defining, the constraining point on the corridor. And left unchanged, this bottleneck will continue to prevent freight access to San Diego and will continue to require the service of the entire region to be structured around this bottleneck. Potential solutions, just real quick here, could be, I would call it surgical double tracking, really very pinpointed projects, increasing the line speed in this area, or a realignment of the corridor if that is not possible. Even just surgical improvements would more than double capacity and would then enable state rail plan objectives to improve freight, intercity, and local rail service in this area and throughout the entire corridor. At San Diego, and next slide, please. As you all know, we have the port as the home to 800 businesses, the Pacific Fleet. And currently we have passenger service terminating at Santa Fe Depot without service to National City or further south. There are two main problems. One, infrastructure constraints that are limiting the ability to grow train service, and another problem, idling trains at Santa Fe Depot, which are impacting the community and are also constraining through capacity in this area. Potential solutions are to upgrade the track infrastructure, build the coaster convention center platform to allow coaster trains to run through Santa Fe Depot and turn at a place a little further south. Then, and this is more of a freight thing, realigning tracks around the 22nd Street freight yard, or potentially to realign the corridor and to build realign the corridor entirely, and then separately from that is also to build a new intercity rail passenger maintenance facility. Those solutions would enable increased freight service to the port and the Navy. It would also enable an extension of passenger service to the convention center and maybe potentially even to National City or further south. So next slide, just to wrap up and summarize this, the studies really underline the importance of at least stabilizing the Del Mar Bluffs area and to fulfill passenger and freight objectives over the long term in the corridor. The bottleneck at San Clemente really has to be addressed one way or another. Then those studies here, they clearly prioritize and link capacity improvements to their benefits. And that will flow into, of course, the low-SAN optimization study, which is an official planning document that is expected to be reviewed and adopted by the low-SAN board towards the end of the year. And that hopefully finds your support as well. And then the results from the freight pathing study, which was a more conceptual study, those insights are now ready to inform official plans. And I'd like to wrap this up simply by re-emphasizing that the program and the projects here presented to you today will benefit the regional rail system by helping to achieve not just state rail plan goals, but generally goals of improving rail service, but that the framework that's been developed here of those repetitive pulse timetables can also be a very useful framework that allows to add or reduce service simply by activating or deactivating slots, and thus giving the railroads in the corridor much more agility in growing service back from current levels, or to adjust when presented with challenges as today.
So I think we'll pause there for any questions on that presentation, and then I can step into the next one.
Okay, yes, I had the opportunity to view this presentation yesterday during a meeting with Transportation Secretary Kim with the Delmar Bluff Stabilization Working Group. And I think that it's one of those situations where the upside definitely is significant. And while I recognize there are some potential downsides if we don't get some infrastructure money to address quality of life issues along the rail corridor, I do look forward to having these key investments made to allow for that pulsing schedule. So with that, I will ask Board Vice Chair Jack Feller to ask his questions.
Thank you. Two things. Connections by coincidence. I didn't really understand that.
I'll take that one.
Okay.
Happenstance. Was not necessarily intended. It just worked out that way. And what Ulrich was really speaking to is an effort that we've been taking to move really from independent operations of those trains to more of a federated operations where the scheduling and the connectivity is integrated so that the customer can have a better routing experience.
Okay. And the other question I have is off-peak is probably middle of the night stuff. As far as freight, I was thinking that was what you meant by off-peak primarily.
No, so off-peak can be at night, but off-peak in terms of our schedule is a lack of midday service we have, for example, where we have, at least NCTD has, I think, between 45 minutes to 120 minutes plus, Damon, up even more, 214 minutes of space between trains coming. So off-peak is any period other than the prime period peak. But what's interesting, there's a separate study that Katie has been leading for us, our strategic multimodal transit improvement plan, that pre-COVID identified that there were multiple peaks now occurring on the I-5 corridor, where traditionally where we were thinking this was off-peak period, that the traffic levels were mirroring peak periods during some of those time periods. So it was shifting dynamics pre-COVID-19 likely that will return some point in the future.
Well, I think it's going to be clear that most of the cities, Solana Beach, maybe not so much, but most of the cities that have crossings and those are longer trains typically. We need to get some buy-in or else trench every inch of the railroad.
So just in response, because Tony made that his exact same comment yesterday at the meeting, and I'll share, kind of the discussion topic because it's an important one. Sandag is advancing a study, and the study says, I think the title of it is looking at realignments. I think, when we use that word realignment, it implies as if we could put trains all over the place. One of the key things in my definition of a realignment is a great separation project. As I was sharing yesterday on our call, that Sandag is doing their study, one of the key pieces we're saying is let's take a look at these areas where we should be focused in on grade separations. For example, Carlsbad and the Carlsbad Village is an area for sure. You want to look at grade separations, particularly in the future, as we're going to operate more trains downtown San Diego, parts of Oceanside, Encinitas. So that's going to be a hot button topic that I think our elected officials should pay more attention and focus more attention. From a regulatory point of view, now that positive train control will be substantially implemented by the end of the year within our railroad industry, which coming down the pike for all of us next as the federal imperative is going to be grade separations, grade crossing incidents and events, and how do we mitigate that? And that's primarily by separating out all other activities from train activity. So that it's a very important talking point because we do want to make sure in the future that we harmonize rail operations with community needs and goals and aspirations.
Good, thank you.
Board Member Jenkins?
I just have one question. Who controls the San Clemente portion of the track?
Metrolink is the designated entity.
Okay.
It's actually owned by Orange County,
Okay.
but there are lots of different trackage right ownership issues as well there.
Mm.
Board Member Desmond, have any questions?
No, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
Board Member Franklin?
No questions, thank you.
All right, I'll just ask, does anybody on the Zoom have any questions?
This is Terry Gasterland. Well, first I want to say thank you for not looking at the double track option for Del Mar. And I'd like to know why you didn't. You know, what was the motivation to leave that out?
So let me answer that, because Ulrich will say, you know, that the answer is that it was significant capital improvements were not part of the scope of the BNS NCTD. So I'm going to answer this question probably in more detail than what people asked for or thought about. So first, you know, the current regional plan does not contemplate double tracking on the bluffs. So I'm just going to say it again. The current regional plan does not include double tracking of the bluffs. For the purpose of this study, they didn't look at any significant project of total cost. It was really about how do we rationalize projects that are already identified to achieve a specific benefit. And so one of the things I try to make sure that we are communicating to people is don't think about railroads like you think about highways. Highways typically, from a construction point of view, focus on building the maximum amount of capacity, throughput, number of cars. Railroads operate differently if you're going to be a smart railroad. You only build the amount of infrastructure that you need to achieve an operational outcome. The reason is because building infrastructure is expensive, and once you build it, you have to maintain it. So for the purpose of this study, Board Member Gasterland, there was no look at the double track because the double track is not in the regional plan, and the improvements that were already contemplated in the regional plan allows us to achieve the operational outcomes that we need to achieve from a railroad operating point of view for both passenger and freight.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And the title of the presentation is Optimizing the Corridor. So the focus in this was to look at the rail corridor alone, exclusive of any of the other operational issues, the surface transit, that pedestrian traffic, et cetera, et cetera. There wasn't really much consideration for that.
Right, correct. And keep in mind too, you know, the service levels that we're talking about are the service levels that are already included in the regional transportation plan. So we're not talking about anything above and beyond. The issues that we've talked about in terms of harmonizing the operations just remain important issues that I think we need to prioritize more in our discussions.
And the other issue that I will briefly mention is that reliability is a critical part of this plan. So state of good repair for the equipment, new investment in locomotives, et cetera, is pretty important part of this.
It goes without saying.
Yes.
So in terms of our signal system, bluff stabilization, and other projects, it assumes significant hardening of our existing infrastructure from a reliability point of view.
Right. Okay. Hearing no other questions.
This is not quite done.
Oh,
We
okay.
got it. So Katie is going to speak.
I'm sure this is going to be a lot of questions.
Well, but yes. Oh, so this is not going to be the typical time, board members, that you hear a presentation without the next steps of how do we try to advance this into implementation. So Katie is going to connect this focus study that was initially advanced by NCTD and BNSF, and we've had a lot of family members, Sandag and Cal STA, come together to shape a program of projects for which there is going to be a grant application submitted. So Katie is going to talk a little bit about that. I will kind of let a little bit of the air in the bag. There will be a proposed funding contribution for NCTD as part of this program of project. So Katie.
Thank you. So I will discuss our upcoming grant application for the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, or TSEP for short. So NCTD and its regional partners have utilized the LoSAN optimization study and the BNSF NCTD freight pathing study to inform this program of projects, like Matt mentioned. And the TSEP program is a state-funded program through SB1 and was established to fund major infrastructure projects along nationally and state significant freight corridors. So SANDAG and Caltrans are eligible applicants, so they will be submitting applications for the region on August 3rd, and we expect to hear staff recommendations in mid-November and adoption in early December. So over the course of the last several months, NCTD, together with SANDAG, Caltrans, CalSTA, have developed a program of projects that provide a focused set of benefits to the region. And this program of projects is significant in not only fully funding Delmar Bluffs Phase 5, but also is transformative for the region in improving freight movement along the I-5 corridor. It also responds to consistent customer feedback through the construction of the Convention Center Station, an extension of coaster service there, which will increase freight and passenger throughput and enable 5 additional freight round trips per day, and provides a layover location south of Santa Fe Depot, like Ulrich mentioned in the previous presentation, and will also pave the way to provide access to the proposed maintenance facility in National City, which was recently awarded TRCP funding from the state. So this table provides an overview of the projects that we are including in the TSEP submittal, and was among those identified as the high priority projects in the freight pathing study. So as part of the TSEP program, there is a regional component, which requires a 30% match. And then there is a state component which does not require a match. So that's why you'll see those 2 columns for TSEP regional and TSEP state, both under the same umbrella program. And there are 2 identified targets for the TSEP program, including a statewide target and a regional corridor target. So just for information, the target for the San Diego border corridor is 11% of the total regional funding available. And I meant to mention that on this previous slide, the TSEP program will provide nearly $1 billion over the next 3 fiscal years. So these are our 5 identified projects, and the LoSAN SD Intermodal Improvement Program will result in 5 additional freight round trips per day, which provides significant benefits and is one of the priorities for the TSEP program. The total ask for this set of projects is $106 million, which will be leveraged with an additional $96 million for a total of over $200 million in investment in the corridor. And like I mentioned previously, this program will fully fund Phase 5 of the Delmar Bluff stabilization. And here we have an overview of the program funding. Like Matt mentioned, we will be matching our TSEP request 23%, and we plan to use federal and state sources over the next several years. And this will leverage funds that were recently awarded to SANDAG and NCTD, including the FRA State of Good Repair and TRCP awards. And so you will see these matching funds programmed in our upcoming capital improvement program. And with that, do we have any questions?
Okay, any additional questions? Board Member Jenkins.
I have 2. The 200 million in investments, is that part of our 800 million we have sitting out there, or is that in addition to?
No, this is, so this, yeah, so if you go down through this list, particularly the San Diego project Phase 1, that actually is a 200 and something odd $1 million project. That's the fairground double tracking and platform construction project. So this funds a Phase 1 of that project, which is included in the $800 million in terms of capacity enhancing projects. And then obviously you're aware of the Delmar Bluffs, which is included in that $800 million as a state of good repair grant. One of the assumptions that we believe that we're headed towards is for Project 6, that NCTD and SANDAG plus an additional $13.5 million of funding, hopefully through the Army Corps of Engineers for Project 6, will get that project completely completed as part of this overall program. The convention center project is included in that $800 million program of project. That's a capacity enhancing project. But the key piece of all of these projects is that you can't pull one of them out and produce the program deliverable, because each of them support the overall plan. The convention center platform, for example, is something great for NCTD as it gets us direct access to Petco Park and Gaslamp. But from a railroad operating point of view, it frees up that platform and tracks at Santa Fe Depot so freight trains can operate and go through, and passenger trains. Without that, you end up with congestion, trains on platforms that means trains can't move. So integrated program or project, it does go towards writing down a significant piece of our state of good repair. The other thing, Board Member Jenkins, is this allows us now to kind of leverage off of this to seek additional grant funds. And so what Katie didn't mention, because she has been busy during COVID-19 period, is that we use this program to apply for a Christie grant associated with for the convention center project to fund the final design for that project. And that project scored really, really high in terms of cost benefit. And we intend to come back for a subsequent grant once the design environmental process is completed to support construction. We could look at this program from San Diego phase 1 towards looking at other opportunities to federalize and bring additional dollars based upon the fact we now have an anchor of contribution. So this is a significant step forward for the region in terms of getting these projects moving forward, getting some momentum going. The other big piece that we don't talk about, but BNSF, if they were here, they would acknowledge this. When BNSF operates more trains on the corridor, guess who gets more money? North County Transit District. So as they operate more freight trains on the corridor, we will receive additional payments from BNSF. This is one of the reasons we are big supporters of freight movement on the corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Feller.
Thank you. It sounds like we're getting rid of Santa Fe Depot. That's not.
No, not even close. No, it really, what all you're doing is, so the way, so if you, when we, for example, as Ulrich talked about San Clemente and the fact that it's single track. So any single track section of your track becomes what we call a choke point, because you're on a single track section, you can't have two trains running.
No.
Hit it towards each other unless you're planning bad things. Okay, so from a plant, if you were to think of Santa Fe Depot as a plant, if you have, I think there are 4 tracks down there now. If you so to the degree that you can keep one of those tracks, so there's a track now that we try to keep open for movement for freight.
Okay.
So to the degree that you can now have 2 of those tracks open, that means more trains can originate and depart and move. That's the whole intent, is creating the capacity for throughput.
Got it.
You're a railroader now.
Any questions from folks on the Zoom? Hearing none, I would say it'd be beneficial, I think, for you to repeat or summarize what the gentleman from BNSF said on the phone yesterday. As we were talking about the benefits of this particular program, it's clear that economically it will advantage BNSF to be able to move more trains. And so he alluded to the suggestion that there might be an opportunity for them to contribute to some of the quality of life improvements that are going to be absolutely necessary in the communities where the tracks run. Can you reiterate what he said?
I don't think he necessarily said that. What he was communicating was that there are both public and private benefits associated with this program, significant. He was also alluding to the fact we talk a lot, and we talk a lot about community impacts and things that we can do to mitigate. And what he was really speaking towards is things that BNSF is doing from a corporate point of view. I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that he promised a specific targeted contribution to anything.
Do they intend to contribute to anything?
No, there are aspects of improvements that they will have to fund that's on their property. The larger part of these are things that the public will have to fund. And part of the reason the public has to fund them because otherwise, for example, Amtrak could never go to National City without this project. They could never gain access to National City and build that maintenance facility without an agreement like this with BNSF. In fact, one of the things I was going over with Katie is for the 11 years that I've been here, this has been something that has been discussed, and the consistent answer was always no, until DJ and I started really collaborating over the last few years to come up with programs and projects that support the improvement for both passenger and freight. And so at the end of the day, there are aspects of expenses that they're going to incur to support the expansion of their needs for operations associated with the port and the military. Then there are aspects of projects like the ones that are on the table right here that we're going to have to fund to support gaining access through BNSF property.
Well, I recognize that we wear the transit district hat at this time, and there's no question that this hat brings benefits to NCTD. I think that a key part of public support for this is going to be identifying the improvements that will be made outside of this particular plan. So I look forward to determining how we're going to advance that particular conversation.
I would agree. And I think, you and I have talked about this, I think a lot.
A lot.
Yeah,
Yes,
a lot.
no question.
I really would encourage elected officials to really focus in a lot more on some of the feedback that you're getting from both NCTD and BNSF, particularly in terms of how do you think about capital investments in railroads and return on investments. And one of the things, we always talk about is most of the programs and grants that we go for require cost benefit calculation. So when you start talking about, I'm not going to give any specific examples, but I'll make up an example. If you start talking about a project that may be a project that the community wants, but if you can't attach significant public benefit to that project, you will never compete well in discretionary grant program applications like the TSEP application or like the federal CRISI grant programs or New Start program. So as you look at these, you have to identify projects that add significant public, economic, ridership, freight movement benefits, and have a price that's relative to yield a strong cost benefit outcome. And so for you all as elected officials, one of the key pieces that I will try to do a better job of articulating is that you have to really start asking questions. Is the project that I'm advancing, what is the public benefit of this project? And there's tons of models out there. And in fact, I'll ask Katie to give you guys a little bit of the output from, do you have that information?
Yes.
Go ahead, Katie.
The benefit cost ratio, the discounted ratio for just the convention center project alone is 6.1. So for every dollar spent on the project, you yield $6 in public benefit in return.
Yeah. And the payback in terms of the number of years that it takes you to return that investment is short and quick. And so, Tony, as we talk about those projects, where grade separation projects are going to score well, they're going to score well, particularly on the benefit of safety improvements, safety enhancements, and potentially sometimes speed and throughput. So we have to start really orienting ourselves that when we're talking about these projects, we need to be asking questions earlier on about, do you have modeling for cost benefit? Because if you don't have modeling for cost benefit, you may spend a significant amount of time talking about a project unless you have your own money. So if you have your own money, you can do whatever you want to do. But when you start talking about multi-billion-dollar projects, typically the way multi-billion-dollar project works is that the local region is going to be the primary funder. And the primary funder is going to also be the person who primarily has to issue debt to fund it. And then you're going to go to the federal government and you can dream and hopefully be blessed and get 50%. But typically you don't get that kind of dream and are blessed with 50%. You're typically blessed with around about 30%, 40% as a match. And that's on the upper range. Because again, the cost benefit goes up when you ask for less, even though your project may be great. And most of these programs are significantly oversubscribed. So they might have $1 billion that they're giving out, and $1 billion is a big number, but it's not a big number when there may be $50 billion of requests. So I hear you loud and clear, Tony, and I think we can work together, but we're going to have to become a lot more precise and focused in on what our project requests are. We're going to have to make sure that the dollars that we spend are actually those dollars that are going to give us a strong return on investment, and that we're able to leverage things. And when you leverage things with public-private partnerships, you typically get the highest return on that investment.
Right. And so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we could go to the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, and we could see a list of proposed grade separations within the region that is quite extensive. And we might take a look at that list and determine these additional 5 freight trains a day, especially during the day, which of those grade crossings needs to be separated in order to even make this feasible from the quality of life impacts that you're talking about. And I think it's important. I agree. We're going to talk about this a lot more, and it's my hope that NCTD will be leading the conversation in the communities in which this particular low sand corridor travels through. So I look forward to that.
And I'll just make one last comment. The example to look at that I think, if it materialized, would be a best practice example is the Carlsbad Village double tracking project. I know I've talked a lot with city staff over time and with elected officials there. That's that to me is it could be the case example of where you could improve community land use. You could support the future prosperity of the city and safety, and mitigate some of the impacts of increased trains. But guess what? If the city maintains a commitment to providing funding, and if you can leverage such funding with local funding, you're definitely going to be in the realm of being able to compete well for federal funding. And those are the perfect kinds of projects. But again, I'm going to start preaching this whole notion of you got to pick a project, be focused singularly on a project, get that project put done, and go to the next project. What we do right now is we get a BB gun out and we shoot pellets everywhere. Not having money is not an excuse for getting a project funded. In fact, we had no money, and we still kept pushing on this program, because if you can shape the program, identify the benefit, typically you can get the money.
Very
I
good.
got a question.
Is that Board Member Desmond?
Yes, thank you. So on this low sand presentation, and even, we're talking about the convention platform and things like that, and Santa Fe Station, we never seem to mention this Grand Central Station that, tomorrow via a budget item, they're going to be asking for another $29 million for putting a total of about 40 million on this Grand Central Station. How come it's not mentioned in what we're talking about? We're talking about low sand or even the cost benefit of that particular item.
Because it's not a project for NCTD. It's not within our program. It's not a project that necessarily impacts our ability to operate one way or the other way. And quite, without really getting into that project, our Grand Central is Oceanside Transit Center. And our focus has been on that project, and we're coming back to you in September, hopefully with a project to deliver our Grand Central and Oceanside with no local money.
Well, good job avoiding that question, man.
Yeah. I noticed that too. You want to try and re-ask it in a different way there, Jim?
I think I'll get the same runaround. Anyway, that's all right.
Okay. Hearing no other questions, I thank you, Katie, for the presentation. There are 2 closed session items, and as a reminder to those participating remotely, you will have to connect to the second Zoom invitation to participate in the closed session items. At the end of the closed session, you will need to reconnect to the regular board meeting. Lori Winfrey, the General Counsel, will now take us into closed session.
Thank you, Chairman. So we have 2 items today for closed session. Both of them are pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Conference with Labor Negotiators. Both of these items have the same designated representatives from NCTD, which is Karen Tucholsky, our Chief Administrative Officer, Rose Jean-Paul, our Human Resources Manager, and myself, General Counsel. Both of the employee organizations at issue are the same, which is the SMART Union, International Association of Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers. The 2 employee groups that are represented and that are under negotiation are the control center technicians and the dispatchers and assistant dispatchers.
Can somebody resend us the link for the closed hearing?
Yes, sir, I will resend it.
Okay, so the board's returning from closed session with no reportable action.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Tucker, this is the time for the executive director's report. Do you have anything?
No. No, my report is included there, so thank you.
All right, and do any board members have anything they would like to report? Hearing none, the question for the clerk is, do we have any remaining public communications?
We do not, sir.
All right, then the next scheduled meeting is the regular board meeting of September 17th, 2020 at 2 p.m. You get all of August off, and everybody be well, wear a mask, and be sure to physically distance yourself appropriately. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. This is Terry.